it's really so easy. Like, it's really
Yeah.
easy to buy real estate. People think it's like going in and buying a pair of jeans.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's so simple. I just walk in and we'll just buy a house. We'll just buy a property. And yes, it is that simple. The professionals in the industry, the realtors, the mortgage agents, the lawyers, we've made it so that it's very procedural, systematic, very commoditized. But this is a big deal. $750,000 you're talking about. This is an expensive pair of jeans. You need to
Yes.
make sure, don't treat it like that. Like, don't take it as a serious
Mm-hmm.
transaction. Don't be scared of it.
Yeah.
Don't be scared about it, but treat it for what it's worth, which is this is your single biggest acquisition you're ever going to make.
What is up, YouTube? Matt McKeever here, and are you a first-time real estate investor? Are you on the precipice, about to take the leap, but maybe you're just a little scared? You're wondering, there's just that feeling in the back of your mind, am I forgetting something? Well, in today's video with Ryan from Carson Law, we're going to sit down and share with you the best practices and best tips we've got if you're a new real estate investor, what you need to be looking out for, particularly from a legal perspective when it comes to your first real estate investment transaction. Smash the like button, hit subscribe, and let's jump into it.
What is up, YouTube? Matt McKeever here. We've got our local legal expert, Ryan from Carson Law, back. Hey, Ryan, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you doing, Matt?
Doing well. And so I'm excited to talk about today's subject matter, which is really, we're just going to explore some of the mistakes, misconceptions, or maybe gaps in knowledge that come up or that you've seen when someone's entering the real estate market for the first time. And we'll probably put a slight investor spin on this. But as we were saying right before we jumped into recording this, I think for a lot of people these days, there's a good chance their first property might actually be an investment property as well. And I guess even before we get into that, there's consequences with if you want to get the free land transfer tax exemption, right? As a first-time purchaser, one of the things that I can remember that came up way back in the day was one of my business partners, his first real estate purchase was a 50-50 joint venture with me, buying an investment property. And then when it was time to come buy or purchase his personal residential house, he was no longer qualified for it, if I remember correctly. So yeah, what other sort of issues or items do you see coming up when people are jumping into real estate for the first time?
Yeah, you're quite right. I mean, you're definitely right that in that situation you painted with your partner, like if he acquired an interest in title, then it's going to null and void any future first time home buyer credit for land transfer tax, because it's not that land transfer tax credit is not specific to personal use properties. Like, you don't get to kind of save it and say, oh, I bought 20 investment properties, now I'm going to buy my first home, the mansion home, because I've done so well with my 20 investments. Now I'm going to do my first personal property. It won't work that way. It's if you've bought a property anywhere in the world, whether it's for personal or investment use, that very first one is your one that you get to use the land transfer tax credit for, right? So I mean, so that's correct. I mean, generally speaking, what are some things that we see, first-time home buyers, whether it's a first-time home buyer investor or just a first-time home buyer personal use, on our end? I think it's it's what you don't, you only know what you know, and you don't know what you don't know, right? And so, I mean, it's obviously very straightforward and a simple concept, but it's so true. You really kind of have to do a little bit of your research. It never hurts before you start like actually making the offers. Contact the different people, that would be involved in the transaction. If you want to try to get a little bit more context, if they're worth dealing with, then even if they're super busy, they should make some time for you, obviously, because you're hopefully not going to be just a one-off client. You'll be a client that would repetitively work with, that realtor, that mortgage agent, that lawyer, throughout your lifetime as a possible investor and or home buyer, right? Like they say, even if you're not a real estate investor, they say the average number of house transactions that a person will do is something like, I think it's like 3 to 5. in their lifetime. You're going to have like maybe a starter house, maybe then a second starter house type of thing, like a build off of that. You'll have kind of like your mid-range, long standing forever home. And then you'll have like one or two, like, what do they call it?
Like downsize or cottage.
Downsizing. That's right. I was going to say downgrade, but that's not probably really, downsizing is right. Like, your empty nesting type thing.
Yeah.
Hey, let's sell the big 5-bedroom house and go into a 1 or 2 bedroom condo because we're going to holiday in Florida or something like that. Right. So you're going to have somewhere between like 3 and 5 purchases and sales likely in your lifetime from a personal use perspective. And then depending on what you do during that cycle, either directly with the bank or through a lawyer, you're going to have like refinances of those properties too, like when the mortgages come up for maturity. So, I mean, in starting the process out, spend some time. I mean, I would be happy to talk to you. It might not be like the second you call me on the phone, hey, we're going to be on a chat right there, but we'll set up a 30-minute consultation, talk to you, speak to you about just generally, okay, so this is who you are. This is what you're thinking of doing. This is what you're thinking of offering on. Have you thought about some of these things? What questions do you have? Like, we're happy to do that, right? I think, doing that kind of ahead of the whole process happening rather than just jumping 2 feet into it and making an offer and then, like you always said, be proactive, not reactive. Being reactionary, it's harder because time is the only thing we can't get back, right? And if you make a firm offer, then if there's like some glaring problems on the offer or something like that, sometimes, like as a lawyer, I'm only able to work with what the contract says. So doing a little bit of proactive, research and discussion with your realtor, mortgage broker, lawyer, especially in a market where you can't make conditional offers, is probably point number one. Like, definitely be proactive, do some research before you make some offers, have some discussions with those 3 professionals. It could definitely save you some serious heartache and problem down the road. Number 2, in like today's market, because of COVID, I think the process is actually slower. Like the parts that move from the time you make an offer to the time you close the deal, the parts at play, like for the realtor, for the bank, for the lawyer, for the appraiser, appraisal is a big one. Like, all of that stuff is actually moving probably slower than it would pre-COVID because people are on like reduced hours. People have less staff, maybe both. People are all dealing with working remotely differently. So some people are much better at it and some people are not as good at it, right? So the process I find is slower. So, give yourself more time. Like, don't make timelines, don't make it like a 10-day closing, for example. Try to give yourself at least 30 days, right? Closing. The other thing I would say, a third point about the appraisal, and because the market is so competitive, or at least it has been, we kind of talked about this before, we'd have to need a little market update to see if it's still as crazy as it was. I think it's still pretty hot across the province. So a lot of people are getting, list price, over list price, multiple bids, firm offers only type situations. And so if that's the case, again, you need to be very cautious that you don't go, or at least if you're going to go excessively over list. So if you're going to buy a house at, let's say, $800,000, right? If that's the list price, but like people are coming in at 850, 950, $1 million, like, that's a big difference. Somebody at especially if you go over the $1 million mark, because now your rules for mortgages change, right? So you really need to make sure that you understand and know that with your mortgage advisor. And you need to know that there is a risk. It might not happen, but we've seen it 1 or 2 times so far in the last 18 months. So that's not that much. But we have seen it where an appraiser has come in and said, sorry, this property is only worth 950, and you agreed to pay $1 million to like $1 million for it.
Yeah.
So now how are you making up that 50K? Because the bank will only finance on appraised value, not the purchase price.
Yeah.
So I think those are 3 points I could throw out at a first-time home buyer, whether it's a personal use or an investor, to consider in today's market for sure.
Yeah, I really appreciate that perspective. And one thing I want to build upon that you mentioned is, being proactive, reaching out, having that conversation. And then in that conversation with the lawyer, also explaining what sort of transaction you're likely planning to get into. Because as Ryan mentioned here, not every transaction is going to have the same rules applied to it, depending upon the context, right? So, it's a completely different experience, and you kind of need to know different things going into buying a new build versus buying, a pre-construction condo versus buying just a single family resale house versus buying an investment property. Each one of those has different aspects, and, the type of clauses you may want or the details you need to focus on in those transactions vary, right? If I'm buying that pre-construction condo and I'm thinking of it as an investment, I probably want to know, do I have the right to assign it? Am I just forced holding the bag until it's actually built and constructed? If I'm looking at buying new construction, understanding Tarion and warranties and closing dates and all that are so important. And as we discussed in a previous video, when we're looking at buying investment properties, understanding, is it a legal conforming use of the property? So are there any common disconnects kind of in any of those themes that you see new buyers consistently bumping up against, where their expectations and realities, there's a big disconnect?
I think it can be summed up in like one word: assumption, right? Like people make assumption. And so we should never make assumptions, because we all know what that makes, people. But I mean, it's hard, again, like in a first time buyer situation, whether you've bought lots of resale before and now you're doing your first builder purchase. Like, I mean, if you've never done it and you're not getting coached by anybody on it who's done it, like, lots of times, then you're only going to know what you're going to know, and you're going to not know what you don't know as well, right? So it's I think it's really important to have a good coach, if it's an investor, have a good coach who's done many transactions of the type you're looking to do. Because then they'll be, whatever your arrangement is with them, whether it's a paid arrangement or some other, however it works with them, you're going to be able to go to them as many times as you need over the course of your first couple of deals to kind of pick their brain and learn from the cuts and the mistakes and the scars that they have, right? Because, every real estate investor's got a little bit whiter, a little bit grayer, a little bit more scarred, because they probably learned potentially the hard way, on some deal somewhere, right? They've learned something the hard way, right? But then hopefully they've learned from many others through discussion and negotiations and learning and being proactive. Okay, these are the things I now need to do and create in my system, right? Of protocols and checks and whatever, right? But yeah, definitely like reach out. You just have to reach out and really talk to, I don't want to like toot the horn of the lawyer, like to be like, we're the be all and the end all, but talking to the lawyer earlier in the process, like lots of times we're not involved until like, a week or two before closing, because that's kind of just the relevance of when we come into the actual transaction, like from a standpoint of the transactional component of process. But that being said, we have a great view of the transaction, because we're the ones, that are going to, get it to the close. If I've used a sports analogy before in these kinds of, videos or educational pieces. And I've sort of said the lawyer is the closer, like if you use like we're the one trying to come in and be the baseball pitcher who saves the game at the end of the day. The realtor is the starting pitcher. They get everything set up, teed up, boom, they set the play. Then you've got, your mortgage broker and home inspectors and other professionals who come in the middle, kind of middle innings there. And then you've got the lawyer who comes in, they're the closer, they're trying to save the deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And get it across the finish line to be done, to close this out, right? And so, not that I know everything about what a realtor does, and not do I know everything about what home inspectors and mortgage brokers and appraisers do, but I have a pretty good idea of what they do to impact the deal getting closed. Mm-hmm. And so I've seen it good and bad, right? I've seen stuff be handled really well for clients, and I've seen it handled not well. And then it kind of leaves us with this, bag and what, and it's kind of like there's only so much I can do with this, because the real estate agreement is already set in stone. I can't change much there. Because of that, you're only able to get this on the appraisal. Mm-hmm. That appraisal then dictates what you're going to get for financing. So we'll try to come up with solutions to your problem, but they're going to be reactionary, as opposed to if we're maybe talked with at the beginning, before you even start offering, we can get an idea of what is this person trying to do? Mm-hmm. I want to go buy from a builder, and it's my first time buying from a builder. What should I know that's different than resale? Well, you should know about adjustments, like builder closing costs. Do you understand that those are additional to the purchase price? Do you understand if you're gonna rent it out, well, you're gonna have to pay the HST rebate up front?
There's so many people that don't realize that going into those transactions. Yeah.
So there's that. We talked about on another episode, knowing what you need to know for multi-residential. Mm-hmm. If you're buying something to be a duplex, a quad, up to 7 units, what should I know about that transaction that's different from single family, right? What should I be considering? Commercial's another beast unto itself, right? What should I know if I'm doing my first commercial deal? So it's, again, not that we're as a profession the be all and end all and the only person you should talk to. That's definitely not what I'm saying. You should talk to everybody proactively, but we're a good person to make sure we're on that list of people you talk to, because we see everything at the end. We're the ones that are going to be registering for you, right? We're the ones that are going to see things, come across the desk and get processed. And theoretically, we can be here's another good sports analogy. We can be the quarterback with you and your team, mm-hmm. Your realtor, your coach, your mortgage agent. If you introduce us to those people, and it's not a straightforward kind of situation that's easy to deal with, which would probably mostly be on the investment side, mm-hmm. we would be able to proactively speak to all them to say, okay, this is what they've told me in their layman's terms they expect they're going to be doing here. What do we all need to know to work together on? You as the realtor, are you going to be doing A, B, and C for them, and making sure that those are in there are happening, so that then when it gets the appraiser and the mortgage agent, you guys can do D, E, and F. And then when it comes to me, I'm already good with A through F, because I expected that to happen anyways, and we're in a good spot to kind of meet their ultimate objective at the end of the day. So making sure I guess the last piece I would say would be a good thing for a first-time buyer personally, mm-hmm. or a first-time investment buyer to do on an investment deal would be, seek out and talk to all your advisors, but definitely seek out and speak with your lawyer. Don't just think it's a transaction. I said to a couple of my colleagues, people think buying real estate because it's so procedural, it's so mm-hmm. systematic, it's really so easy. It's really easy to buy real estate. People think it's going in and buying a pair of jeans. Mm-hmm. It's so simple. I just walk in and we'll just buy a house. We'll just buy a property. And yes, it is that simple. The professionals in the industry the realtors, the mortgage agents, the lawyers, we've made it so that it's very procedural, systematic, very commoditized. But this is a big deal. Like you said, one of your other, intros, buying real estate is big. Like you're talking big dollars. Golden Horseshoe average price is like $750.
Yeah.
$750,000 you're talking about. This is an expensive pair of jeans. You need to make sure, don't treat it like that. Like, don't take it as a serious transaction. Don't be scared of it.
Yeah.
Don't be scared about it, but treat it for what it's worth, which is this is your single biggest acquisition you're ever going to make.
Yeah.
Unless you make it big and you're buying Bugattis and Lambos and Ferraris, this is going to be, buying real estate will always be your single largest transaction.
Yeah, absolutely. And really appreciate all that context, Ryan. And I know we've mentioned it in the past, but I just want to reiterate it because I know people are discovering this content newly every day. One huge misconception I see from like new first-time buyers, whether it's a first-time investor or a first-time buying your principal residence, is they've got the TV version of lawyers in their mind. And they're like, oh my God, I'm going to call Ryan, talk to him for 30 minutes, and that's going to be like $1,000. And what they don't understand is that real estate law and transactions are treated a little bit differently, right? And so it's really often on a more like overall transaction basis that you're being charged. And it's not like there's a minute clock that's tracking and I need to make sure that I don't waste a second on a stupid question, because again, it's actually important that going into talking with a lawyer that you guys understand that at least most lawyers aren't going to. And like, Ryan, if you don't mind just sharing, if I'm a new client, want to reach out, like that initial discovery call, that's completely free, right?
Yeah. I mean, like for the most part, I've always made it part of my practice over the last 15 years to provide, people with a complimentary 30-minute call or conversation or email or whatever the case is. So I'm happy to talk to people at a high level, generally about whatever their situation is. We're not going to get into that in that call. We're not going to give like legal opinion or legal advice. Because we're not retained at that point. But, in the context that we're talking right now, we could certainly, in 30 minutes, get a good idea of, here, these might be some things for you to be flagged with. These are some things to consider and think about. These might be some next steps, and just get context from them as a potential, new client, right? And we're not going to charge for that. I mean, if you call me back again and like you want another opinion and you want like, like you actually want something flushed out, well, then we might say, okay, look, we need to get retained here. We'll give you like a formal written opinion and all that kind of stuff, but that would cost you something, right? But 30-minute consultation, we're constantly kind of having those set up. I've got no problem doing that. Pretty much everybody on my team of lawyers and assistants and clerks, are similar that way. Like, we're not going to turn around and, slam you for a tenth of an hour, like, every time you call or email. Even our real estate retainers are set up to be honest with you, almost all of our services are done on a block system. So a block fee system is what you described, where you don't pay by the hour. You basically, we review with you ahead of time to say, okay, you want us to do a purchase, you want us to do an incorporation, you want us to do a shareholder agreement, like whatever it happens to be, we've already enumerated, here's the service we're going to give you, here's the list. It's going to cost you X dollars in legal fees, plus any office disbursements and HST. And, whether you call us or email us, once or 100 times, like that's kind of built into it. Now, if there's something that goes outside of that enumerated list, this is how we work. I can't say for everybody else, but that's where our retainer will say, if we go outside of this list, then there'll be, additional charges, which will notify you will be likely at the hourly rate. Or, the title search came back, bad. There's these problems on it. I estimate it's going to cost another, $500 to $700 to fix that. You'll see that on the bill, that kind of thing. So yeah, we want our clients to call us. We want our clients to email us. We want the client to build a relationship with us. Like when somebody says to them, you know, who's your lawyer? We don't want them to be like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I've never even talked to him. I don't even know, right? Like some clerk did my file and I've never talked to the lawyer at all, or I don't know, he's some guy with a red beard. I'm not really sure. You know, we want them to very definitively know who their lawyer is because there's a relationship, right? Like we're not, even though we're a transactional industry, you know, the type of law and the files that we process are transactions. We don't want people to feel like a number. We want them to know this is something we care about. If we do our jobs right and we build relationships as opposed to transactions, then naturally we'll have lots of transactions.
Yeah, really appreciate that perspective, Ryan. And again, just appreciate you jumping on the channel, sharing all your experience. And for everyone that's been watching or listening, all of Carson Law's contact information is in the video description down below. Again, really encourage you guys, reach out and be proactive when you reach out, because again, these are big transactions. So it's just important you understand what you're getting yourself into, what red flags to be aware of, what's also a red herring. Because I also see investors sometimes focus on silly things that don't matter when there's a big glaring obvious thing that you should actually be focused on. And if you're not regularly contacting your team of experts, I mean, why do you have them in the first place? So it's so important that you feel comfortable having these conversations with your lawyer. So again, contact information in the video description down below, and really appreciate this, Ryan.
Thanks, man.
Thanks again to Ryan from Carson Law for taking the time to shoot this video. I hope you guys got value from it. And we're always trying to provide you guys value on this YouTube channel. So we've actually put together a survey where we'd love to get your input, your feedback, as well as your suggestions for future content, future guests, future segments, the type of content we create, you know, all that stuff. We've created like over 1,000 videos at this point in time. There's thousands of hours of me talking about real estate. And I know you guys still have questions, and I know there's subject matters you still want us to cover, but it feels like we've talked about it all. So let us know, what haven't we talked about in the survey? We'd love your feedback. Let us know. Link in the video description down below. Thanks, guys.